Welcome, Daniel Nation, to the Daniel Report, our monthly podcast. And this month we're focusing on the Republican Party of Texas state chairman race that's coming up at the state convention next week. And this is part 5 of that series. And today my guest is Bill Eastland. Bill, welcome to our program.
Thank you so much, Brandon. It's great to be here.
So Bill is a long time member of the Republican Party, been very involved, and he's running for chair and vice chair positions. So Bill, tell us a little bit about what made you decide that you wanted to run for this.
Well, there's a couple of things. Most importantly, the party is kind of in a downswing in terms of our ability to do the basic functions of the party. Um, and we need to make a change in that regard. I have some pretty strong views about the qualities that make a good party chair at any level, and at the county level, at the state level, and even at the national level. Although national is a little difficult because that's a pretty high-paid job, but it's a little different, I should say. It's not, and it is a difficult job, but it's it's a pretty high-paid job. My point is that right now. Uh, we are doing just one thing that we have set out to do right, and that one thing is legislative priorities. And of course, this was an important reform that we made some several cycles back, in which we created the legislative priorities process. We have a legislative priorities committee at the state convention. We also have legislative priorities committee at the SREC level. And what's really important about that is that, in essence, when we create these legislative priorities, it's really our immediate wish list. Now, back in the 19th century and even in the first part of the 20th century, you'd call that a platform because that's the way the parties wrote those things, right? In other words, they're saying this is what we want Congress or the legislature to do. Now, of course, for us, we're focusing on the legislature. We're not out there. It's up to the national party to talk about Congress, right? That doesn't mean there might be some issues where we might want to address, but so far we have not done that. We have focused just on saying these are the 8 things that we like the legislature to pass in the upcoming session. We have gotten better and better at this each cycle that's gone along, and the whole process almost has a life of its own. And what I mean by that, it doesn't matter who the state party chair is. We have these folks in the party all over the state who are very interested in lobbying the legislature. Folks go to Austin, they sign up to testify, they talk to legislators individually, and we have had increasing success as we've gone through this process. And I think we will continue to do so because the grassroots are really engaged in the process. With respect to the administration of the party itself, we used to have a pretty robust organization at the state party level with enough staff to get the job done. We would ramp the staff up during the election period, sometimes having as many as close to 40 paid staffers in the state, uh, doing our victory effort and getting out the vote. We also had adopted a program some several years back to uh, keep track of people that have newly moved to Texas, and we contact them and we determine whether or not they're with us or not. And if they are with us, then we make sure they get registered to vote because just because they move here doesn't mean they're automatically registered. So we get them registered to vote, and then of course we make sure they then go vote. And this has been quite successful. Um, we had a not so good election year in 2018 because, of course, that was sort of a traditional situation in which it's the off year election after a presidential election. The voters are inclined to not be so sure sometimes about the new president, and they will vote the party in power, quote unquote, i.e., the president's party. They'll vote to either take them out of control of one or the other or both congressional houses, um, but they would um, And so then you would have a situation in which you're not able to do what you had set out to do initially, or the president's agenda gets hurt in that process. So uh, what we had is a real effort by the Democrats, because they were just shocked that Trump won. They all have Trump derangement syndrome. And so they really got organized, and we lost our shares of the two-party vote. In other words, percentage points off of what we had been getting in previous elections. We've been doing pretty good at increasing our share of the two-party vote in each election. Our high point year, relatively speaking, was the 2014 gubernatorial election. And you might recall in that year, Greg Abbott, it was an open seat election. Greg Abbott won that race by beating Wendy Davis with 20% spread in the vote. That's pretty awesome. And if you get to that point, the other party then has to reconsider what they're doing. But then, and of course, we did well in 2016, but then we fell off in 2018. Now, since then, in every cycle since then, we have gained in the share of the two-party vote, we have gained a higher percentage each time. It's just small, it's 1 or 2%, but the point about it is we've gained those up to this point. Now, we have a difficult election season this time. It's one of those off-year elections. We have some problems because inflation is the Biden inflation still lingers, right? This is going to create a problem with a lot of American households when they're asked the question, are you better off today than you were a year ago? And if a majority of people are answering that no, in September, then we have an issue. So a lot of us, of course, would love to see Trump in the war, not walk away, but actually win the war and get it finished and get the Iranian people in control of that country. That's extremely important. You have to get rid of the IRGC entirely. And if that means we have to take boots on the ground action, I'm all in favor of that. We also have to get inflation under control. Now, a big part of that is winning that war and having a free flow through the Strait of Hormuz, and then oil prices will come down radically, and that affects inflation. That'll bring inflation down. But there's other things that should be done. Now, I've never been a supporter of tariffs, and I think I disagree with Trump in that area. I don't disagree with him that we need to ensure that our trading partners aren't cheating. And there's some other ways to do that other than just raising tariffs willy-nilly. Unfortunately, this creates uncertainty it creates uncertainty in the stock market, but not the stock market, but in markets for goods and things like this, things that are imported. The trading regime today is so much more complex than it was when I was an economics student back in the 1970s. And so when you raise tariffs, that's a tax on the consumers, and that's the American people. So that runs inflation up, and lots of studies have been done on these tariffs, and they prove that the consumers are paying up to 90% of the tariffs in almost all cases. So the point is, we need to get control of this stuff. I would prefer that Trump just drop these tariffs, and therefore we can actually have real progress in getting inflation under control. Inflation needs to be under 2% and preferably closer to 1% to be a rational level of inflation. So what I'm hopeful is that will happen. But in the meantime, we can't control that. That's out of our hands. What we do need to do, though, is build a victory effort for this upcoming election. We are not in a position to do so. We won't really be able to build a strong victory effort until 2 years from now. Because, we don't have the money resources. We've lost a lot of our donors at the state party level. We have to rely on a couple of West Texas billionaires just to keep the doors of the party open. And so I believe that we need to sit down and have a complete reset of what we're doing. A political party has 4 important elements to it, but 3 of them work together all the time, or maybe don't work together. And one element, of course, is the grassroots of the party, the people that are the grunts on the ground, precinct chairs and other activists, convention goers. uh, the other important group in the party are the donors. Now, the donors, may have different views from what the grassroots of the party have, but there's still many of these donors understand the importance of electing Republicans. But they will wax and wane on what they're giving depending upon their judgment of how the party is doing. I think we're in a period where our donors just aren't giving the kind of money they used to, and we don't have the same base of donors that we used to have. I think we need to figure out a way to bring them back in the fold. Now, a key point of getting the donors back is then the other part, the elected officials. The elected officials are extremely important, and unfortunately, we have a kind of a rocky relationship with some of our elected officials these days. What we should be doing is taking an attitude of where we want them to pass legislation we want to see, but what we shouldn't do is be in their face so much that they just don't want to talk to us anymore. We shouldn't be pissing our elected officials off. We should have a relationship with them where we agree to disagree, but still agree to work on the things that we can actually succeed at. And so the point being, we must rebuild a robust victory effort, and we need to get that new mover program back in place because gobs of people are continuing to move to Texas every single year. And any Republicans that move here, we got to get them registered to vote and get them to the polls. But we don't have an infrastructure in place to do that. We used to. The best party chair of the modern era of the Republican Party of Texas, I don't know what it was like decades ago, but I do know what it was like in the 1960s because that is when I first got active. I joined my teenage Republican club in my high school in 1964 and worked in the Goldwater campaign. So I go way back. I've lived the history of the modern Republican Party. We were like meeting in the phone booth in the 50s, and the election of John Tower was pivotal. The party began to get organized. Lots of people were moving to Texas from the Rust Belt. Many of those people were Republicans, which grew our ranks dramatically through the 1970s. And it took us, obviously, a couple of decades, but we finally started winning all the statewide races in the mid 1990s. And then we finally had the trifecta of state government with the executive, legislative, in both houses of the legislature in 2002. In 2003 with the legislative session that started in 2003, and we've had it ever since. There's been a little bit of back and forth in terms of election results, but we've never lost control. And the point about it is, as a majority party, we have to recognize that we still need to win the votes of swing voters. We have to always be thinking about those people, and we have to do the things necessary to convince them to vote for us. Now, in this particular election, we've got one thing that's really going in our favor, and that is that the Democrats are doubling and tripling down on stupid. They still get worse and worse. They wind up with candidates that are worse than the ones they've had before, and their image is sinking in party ID polling dramatically. It's really quite unusual compared to the history of this party ID polling. So the point about it is we have a golden opportunity, but it may be that the best argument we'll have in the November elections is those guys are crazy. You can't vote for them, right?
Exactly.
I think we got a lot of material, Now that may cause some people to decide not to vote at all, but at least they're not voting for Democrats, right?
Yeah. So thanks for giving us such thanks for giving us such a great history of the modern Republican Party. So let me ask you a two-part question. What would you say has been our secret sauce of building such a great movement in Texas? And number two, where are we getting it wrong right now that you'd like to improve it?
Well, I kind of alluded to that. Okay. The secret sauce obviously is that we had particular politicians like John Tower and others that came after him that worked hard to build the party organizationally throughout the state. A lot of people don't realize this, but up to the mid 1960s, we were no different than a third party is in Texas today. We were a convention party. We nominated all our candidates in convention. We didn't have a primary. The only election that counted in Texas was the Democrat primary. So the point is that we obviously took advantage of the growth of Texas with the in-migration of a lot of new people who were predominantly Republican. Uh, and and of course we then worked to build uh, strong party organizations in all the big cities. I mean, there was a point where we had the majorities in all the large urban counties. Um, that's not true anymore, but we did some time back. Uh, and then, of course, we then got better and better at just recruiting people. But it took us a long time. This doesn't happen overnight. And of course, what we have to do is defend that. Now, in terms of what we need to do, I've already talked about a lot of that. We have to get party leadership in that understands their job is being the chief, the diplomat in chief, the cat herder in chief. What you've got to do, you've got to bring all the important elements of the party together and get them to agree on a goal and get them all working towards it. And that means that people that, are angry because their pet piece of legislation didn't get passed have to put that aside, at least for the election season. The time period for arguing over those things is during the primary. Once the primary is over with, we have to close ranks, support the ticket up and down the ballot. All of us do. That's the only way a political party succeeds. And we have to bring our donors back. We have to have a better relationship with our elected officials. Uh, and and so I think it's incumbent upon the party, which is the representative of the grassroots, or it is actually not just the representative, it is the grassroots, right? I,
Yeah.
I think what we need to do is kind of change our attitude. And what we need to do when we're looking for to elect a party leader, like a member of the SREC or a state party chair and vice chair, you need to look for that person that understands that that job is diplomat in chief, the cat herder in chief, instead of somebody that may be wanting to use the position to run for party office. I mean, I'm sorry, for public office, not party office. I mean, we had that in Allen West. He became state party chair because he intended to run for governor, and of course had that work out for him in the end, not so well. But but of course that his mistake was going out and challenging Greg Abbott, because by that point in time, Greg Abbott was one of the most popular politicians in this state. He had been uh, more successful even than Rick Perry had. And I think that's still true today. He's one of our strongest vote getters. This is pretty important. And so we have that advantage in this election on the ballot we've got coming up, because at the top of the ticket, you've got a person there at the very top, but that's the Senate race. But you have a person there that a lot of swing voters will vote for. And what we want them to do is to vote for us all the way down the ballot. And this is why we need to argue that our party is more aligned with their values than that other party, which is not a hard sell in this particular election year.
Yeah, so let's talk about the grassroots versus the donor class. The Tea Party did a great job of really bringing the grassroots into the party, and then of course MAGA has done a great job bringing the grassroots into the party. So now we got this huge coalition of grassroots, but there's a lot of infighting with what we would call the establishment or the donor class. How do you bridge the divide between the grassroots, the donor class, and the elected officials to build the unity within the party again?
You kind of have to preach a gospel of let's figure out how not to be confrontational, but instead have productive conversations to learn to agree to disagree. The one of the problems we have is that too many of the grassroots in the party. That I understand their emotions about it because they're highly frustrated with our elected officials. You know, there's still a lot of people out there that say it doesn't matter whether they're Republicans or Democrats, they're all corrupt, right? It's a uniparty. And so they're frustrated. But there is a real difference between the two parties for sure in terms of, how they behave in the legislature. Uh, I, we should always approach our elected officials politely. Now, we've managed to get a number of them upset over our censure procedure, our Rule 44 procedure. Now, there a lot of people that are watching this may not realize I am the first person in this this modern era, as opposed to the 1990s. This was proposed back in the 1990s in a different form, but I was the first person to bring a censure rule before the Rules Committee at a state convention. I did that in 2014, and just so people know, I was on the SREC for one term from 2012 to 2014. I brought that rule, and of course the powers that be, literally the powers that be at that time, quickly moved to shut me down and get it dismissed. But 2 years later, one of my colleagues from Tarrant County, Jeremy Blosser, served on the Rules Committee, and basically, similar to how you come up with an idea, you introduce a bill in the legislature, it doesn't get very far in the first one, but you start to build support for it, and then you either get it further or pass it in the second one. Usually by the third legislative session, it passes. That's exactly what happened with our first most important legislative priority, which was constitutional carry. So what I'm saying is there. Uh, we did wind up passing Rule 44. It did not have any teeth in it in the beginning, and what happened, of course, at the last state convention, teeth was finally put into it. The elected officials didn't like the Rule 44 we had, but they knew that it was meaningless because it really wasn't going to make much difference. It can make a difference in terms of PR in a particular primary race, in some parts of Texas, but not in an overall sense. So once you put the teeth into it, well, then that makes it entirely different. Now, at the end of the day, the SREC chose not to apply the penalty to any of the people that actually were censured in this process. But there are state legislators that hate us, and they are wanting to introduce bills to really clip our wings. Now, many of those bills, in my opinion, will be strictly unconstitutional under an important Supreme Court decision decided in 1989. It's called the March Fong Yu decision. That's the Chinese name of the woman who was Secretary of State of California. She was sued by all the political parties in California because the legislature had passed a law that severely restricted what parties could do and micromanage the governance of parties. This case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court said that the state government doesn't have the right to regulate parties under the First Amendment. In other words, parties have First Amendment rights of association and implied rights of affiliation under the First Amendment, and they get to decide how they govern themselves. It also another thing that the California law did was prevent parties from endorsing their own candidates, which is a little bit crazy if you think about it. The Supreme Court said that was completely impermissible because a party's whole reason for existence is to carry its agenda into public office to get it passed. And therefore, you can't restrict the parties even endorsing their own candidates. So, and the language that's used in that Supreme Court decision is extremely important because it says the only area in which the state has an interest in regulating any party activity is in the process of ensuring free and fair elections. And because many primaries in the United States enlist the apparatus of the party to conduct the primaries, You can then regulate those parts, but you can't regulate any other thing. I'm making the argument right now that here in Texas, some of the rules that are in state law governing political parties are in fact unconstitutional under that March Vong decision. Most especially the law that requires that the chair and vice chair of a political party be of opposite gender, right? So that's strictly unconstitutional. It's also the same thing with respect to SREC members. Now that's a little bit different because you're electing two people, but you still uh, you're limiting the choices of the voters when you do that. I mean that's me talking, not so much on you decision. But the point about it is that's part of party affairs that doesn't have anything to do with elections. It has nothing to do with elections. So that's unconstitutional. There are some other areas, but I, I'm um, I'm trying to point out we tried to assert our rights to have an influence over our elected officials by passing Rule 44. I have reached a point where I'm very frustrated with what's happened because Rule 44 is a mess. It needs to be fixed and cleaned up. I'm going to try to work to do that at this state convention. Be talking to the Rules Committee, but I think more important than that, we ought to do something else that will make a huge difference in not only how we choose our candidates, but also in making the party much stronger as an organization. A lot of people don't know how Utah uh, does their nominating process. And this is state law in Utah, but this is the way they do it. What in Utah, the parties meet in convention before the primary. Their primary is in the summer, which is a rational time to have a primary. Having a primary in March makes no sense, you know. So the point is, uh, they meet in convention, and at the convention for every public office that's on their ballot, they both in caucuses and in the state convention as a whole for statewide caucuses for districts and the convention as a whole for statewide offices. They go through an election process to choose no more than two candidates to appear on the party's primary ballot. So it still creates a competitive situation in the primary, right? It's not like the Libertarians or the Greens in Texas where they're picking their final nominee in that process. You not only have party grassroots, uh, as I say, take the first bite at the apple, but then you also involve the primary voters to make the final choice. So it shares that responsibility. Um, I think that's actually a better way to do it than just doing the straight convention process. But by doing that, what happens is, and a lot of people don't think about the dynamics of what happens when you change rules, but this is an excellent example. A lot more people will start coming to precinct conventions. And one of the reasons, of course, is because candidates for office that are wanting to get nominated are going to get their supporters to show up. When you have a lot more people showing up at your precinct convention, number one, you're far more likely to wind up eventually with a precinct chair, right? Because there'll be somebody there that'll become precinct chair. Where, in a lot of our urban areas, we have gobs of precincts that don't have precinct chair at all, even in some Republican areas. But the other thing is, whoever is the precinct chair, the leader in that precinct, will then have a list of people that participated in the precinct convention that is a starting point for organizing the precinct for the victory effort in November elections. You're going to have a broader, deeper, stronger party, a party organization when you do that. And to me, that's what's really important about it. And that is the way to actually uh, build a bigger, stronger party in the future. I need to point out that we used to have much more robust state conventions. In fact, the 2014 convention was the best attended ever. We had some 12 to 13,000 people show up, and most of the delegate slots were filled, and with alternates sitting in the in the alternate area. And my point about it is it was much stronger back then. Now the reason that was the case is because of the result of two important political movements. First, the Ron Paul campaigns of 2008 and 2012, and second, the Tea Party. It all culminated in a lot of people coming into the party and become active in the convention process. But then we began to dwindle away. My one of our former county chairs in Tarrant County. He's a to me he's a just a marvelous was a marvelous county chair. Understood exactly the role. He said to me once, the half life of a party activist, political activist, doesn't matter which party you're talking about, is about 10 years. And what that means is that people come in, they get active. After a while, they kind of get burned out, they drop out. There's a cadre that stays forever, like me, right? but but then a lot of other people, they're gone. Most of them are gone after 10 years. And so what happens is if you don't have new movements, political movements that bring people into the party, then you start to decline. And we have been on a steady decline ever since those two movements filled our ranks with a lot of people. Now, the other movement, of course, that really significantly grew the Republican Party from the mid 1970s, right up through the 90s, was the pro life movement. Extremely important because it brought a whole bunch of people. Many of them didn't even bother to vote, but they came in after Roe versus Wade and really grew our party dramatically. And so it wasn't simply the new movers coming, it was also this new group of voters that realized they had to get involved because of the apostasy of allowing unfettered abortion, which is essentially what effectively in time was exactly what Roe versus Wade did. Uh, and so that gave us a huge boost, and we had steady growth and more people being elected to state conventions and coming. But lately, we have really dwindled. I'm beginning to wonder whether we'll even have more than a third of the people who have been elected as delegates or alternates to this convention even showing up. I know a lot of people that have come in the past and they're just not going. And part of that is there's a real strong bias against Houston. People don't like going to conventions in Houston. So anyway, these uh, I'm just saying that we need to recognize what makes a party strong, and we need to put in place those methods that will make a party strong. And of course, if we try something and it doesn't work, we come back the next time and try something else. But the point about it is we always need to keep our eye on the goal, and the goal is to increase our share of the two-party vote by 2 to 3% each election cycle until we reach the point that we're winning all of our statewide races by 60% or more. If we do that, the Democrats are going to give up trying to take Texas.
Yeah, those numbers sound good to me, Bill. So let's, in this last segment here of our interview, let's talk about a couple of job questions here for the chairman job. So what experience do you bring in managing large organizations, budgets, and teams?
Well, I don't. What I am, okay. Let me point out, I got elected as a precinct chair in 1980. I'm actually the dean of my executive committee. I've served continuously longer than anybody else. I've been very active in my county party. I'm a rules guy, so I've consistently served on our rules committee. Uh, I've also been chair of a bunch of committees. At, in the past, it was back in the aughts. I was 3 times a temporary chair, and 2 of those times I was a permanent chair of my Senate District Convention. And we had successful conventions every time. And the time I wasn't the chair, I had a friend of mine whom I wanted to, become chair and learn how to do it. Also, there was a challenge to the leadership in that particular convention. And I was trying to build the broadest coalition possible. It was better to have him run than me run. And we succeeded by beating the opposition 80-20. So, but but the point is, I've gone through that process. I've served on the SREC. I was on the Rules Committee at the SREC. I've observed, great leaders over the years. I've talked about Steve Holleran. He was our county chair for 10 years, one of the best county chairs ever. And then, of course, I served under Steve Ministeri, and of course I supported Steve Ministeri when he won. And Steve Ministeri is the best state chair ever. That guy came in. We were $600,000 in debt. Our previous leadership had just run us into the ground, and he came in and he immediately went to the elected officials, had a good relationship with them. They donated the money to get the party out of debt, and then he began a strong fundraising program that gave us the money that we needed for our victory efforts. And he created a strong party organization that took care of all the tasks. And I talked about that new mover program. He put that in place. He started the grassroots club, intending to get more small donors for the party. That's gone moribund. We need to bring that back in a strong way. What I'm saying is that I have observed what is good leadership. I know what it takes. And although I personally haven't, served as a county chair or, well, as a party chair at all in any capacity, I have a lot of knowledge about this. Now, let me just put a footnote in here. I am not expecting to win this race. I'm realistic about this. The reason I am running is to try to educate the voters on the problems that the party has and how to pick a party leadership that will actually turn the party around. I mean, specifically, I believe the current leadership has got to go. And I'm not going to go into the details of his problems, but there's just been failure here, and we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing. We need to turn it around. Listen, if I got elected, which I don't believe I'll be elected at all, but if I got elected, the first thing I'd do, I would bring together, former party chairs like Steve Ministeri, Tom Meckler, and others, and plus some key politicians. Want to sit down and talk about how we can develop a better relationship, how we can grow the party to be able to have a strong victory effort, and work with our elected official in those regards, and how we can get our donors back. So, my point is, I know what needs to be done. I will rely on a lot of other people, and I will hire, an executive director that really does know what they're doing. In fact, I'll hire a former executive director because she's really, really good. She was our county party chair in the first decade of the teens.
So how should delegates go about selecting the next chairman? What criteria should they be looking for? What's the best way to go about selecting the next chairman?
All right, and this is key because many delegates, when they hear these people speak, it's like listening to a politician. So they're kind of programmed. Average, political actor is kind of programmed to think about what these people are talking about on the issues, right? How they stand. So, they want to feel comfortable with that this person is part of their beliefs, their faction in the party, right? And so that's what they're looking at. But those are the wrong things to look at. You're not looking at somebody who's just going to agree with you on the issues or sounds like a politician. Because the problem is they may be a politician who actually just wants to use the office as a springboard to get elected to public office. The problem with that is if that's the case, then decisions that they make as party chair have to do with what it'll do to help them get elected to public office. In other words, they're putting their interests first. A party chair must put the party's interest first in every decision that they make. The other important thing about this is a party chair must follow the wishes of the state convention in the both the platform, the legislative priorities, and everything else they want to do. I'm just trying to say that you are the representative of those delegates that are at the state convention, and so you need to follow what they do. Uh, and don't vote for somebody just because you think they'd be good, serving in the legislature. Vote for somebody that actually has the interest of the party at heart.
Yeah. Thank you for helping us to set that criteria up. So, last question would be whoever does get elected as the new chairman, what should their top priority be for their first 100 days?
Well, their top priority is what I just talked about. Uh, they got to bring together the elected officials, the donors, and the party itself in a process where we can try to at least have some cooperation on a victory effort. I think that victory effort in this particular cycle is going to have to be led by the governor and the lieutenant governor. We are not in a position to ramp this up in the short period of time between now and election day. But what we need to do is we need to set the stage for the future. And the first thing to do is to figure out how to get a better relationship with our elected officials, how to get those donors back. And then we've also got to sit down and hire personnel that has good experience, that knows what to do, and hopefully reach a point where we've raised enough money we can start to hire people to work in the victory effort and voter outreach and things like this. We used to have all kinds of staffers that did specialized things. We don't have any specialized staffers at all anymore, except I think we might have a fundraiser, but we're not doing so good on that.
Yeah, if I could ask just a quick follow-up question. So I know you're, saying the current chairman has got to go, current leadership has to go. Do you think our current chairman made the right decision to pull in Governor Greg Abbott for this convention and Dustin Burrows and Texans for Lawsuit Reform and some of these PACs that the grassroots loathe? Was that a good decision on his part to pull in the establishment to support the convention?
Well, I would say that there are a lot of people that would want to get upset about it. I would caution them that they should not get upset about that, because in the pickle that we find us in, we need that kind of support. And I also think it's important to have a good relationship with the governor, and even some of these groups out there. Look, I know that a lot of people don't like TLR, and I'm a little frustrated because they're kind of more chamber of commerce oriented than not, and I'm not keen on that, because what happens with the chamber of commerce mentality is it leads to corporate welfare and corporate favoritism, and I'm all opposed to that. But what I'm saying is they're still Republicans. They're part of the process. They're part of the coalition, and we need to work with them where we have agreement. We do have agreement. Look, Texas for Lawsuit Reform did yeoman work in getting Republicans elected before we took control of the Texas House in 2003, and then we had several sessions in a row at which a lot of the quote lawsuit reform priorities that they had got enacted, and we were in favor of them. They're not all bad. Yes, we can disagree with them in some areas, but I'm just saying. Also, to my mind, I don't see why anybody out there can be upset with Greg Abbott. Now, there's things that happen that people get mad about, but this guy is a better governor in terms of getting out there, adopting some of our legislative priorities as his own, and actually getting them enacted. He is a tremendous ally when it comes to part of our legislative priorities process. We should be on a good relationship with him. Now, fortunately, Steve Ministeri is a senior advisor to the governor. That's critical. Steve Ministeri is, to me, he's at the center of all things Republican in Texas. And I'm just pointing out, like for instance, 4 years ago, the convention booed John Cornyn when he came to give a speech. He had just given us $50,000 to help pay for the convention at the time, and they booed him. I was walking across the hall just shaking my head. I could not believe that they were doing that, because Cornyn, no matter what else people may get upset with him about, has always been a trooper. I mean, the excellent example of that, when he lost to Paxton, he very graciously announced he was endorsing him, and we had to win in November. This is the right attitude. I really do believe, and he didn't engage in sour grapes or anything like that. I believe that we need to recognize that these are our elected officials. We need to have a better relationship with them. And so these people that are carping and complaining, maybe, and I know people get mad at me about this, but if they don't believe that the Republican Party, has their platform in their head in mind, maybe they should start a new party. Okay, but because at the end of the day, there's two important facts here. Parties in America don't succeed unless they're big tents. You have to have a coalition of views, and people, to have a coalition of views, that means that every member of the process needs to be tolerant of the other members. Okay, and the other important thing about this, the preamble to the Republican National Party rules reads, and I'm paraphrasing it, but it says the Republican Party is the party of the open door. And it goes on and talks about how we accept anybody that agrees with us to come into the party. We should not be pushing people away.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Bill, for sharing your thoughts with us on the interview. I've put your Facebook page up. It's going to be facebook.com/Eastland Tax. If you want to find out more about Bill's campaign for chairman of the State Party of Texas, and you're running for the vice chair. So if we don't get you in on the first round, you'll be back for another round of votes there. I want to mention that the website for the convention is texasgop.org, and I think most of you have probably registered by now, but if you have not registered for the convention and you are a delegate or an alternate and there's opportunity for you to register, we would encourage you to please get registered and come on down to Houston next week. And then last but not least, our website is danielnation.com. You can find this podcast out on our website and also our upcoming events. Bill, I will be at convention next week, and I look forward to meeting you in person, sir.
I'm looking forward to meeting you too, and I do get your emails, and I'm following Daniel Nation, and I appreciate all the work you do. If I might, I will just say that if anybody wants to contact me, they can email me at a simple email. It's eastland@reagan.com, as in Ronald Reagan, REAGAN.com. So that's a pretty easy email for people to remember. But they can contact me that way, and I'll be happy to talk to anybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill, so much for coming on the Daniel Report. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. You take care.